Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I apologize about the delay this morning. I did have to postpone this class an hour to 11 o'clock. It's 11 noon, and I'm already very busy this Saturday. So I apologize for the inconvenience. But we will go ahead and continue our class, our meditation class today. Today specifically we'll be talking about dealing and working with distractions during meditation. Last week we did a quick back to basics class where we covered some of the pretty much the basics, the posture, how to meditate, what to do. So if you missed that class, please do review it and go back to our YouTube channel to rewatch it. And of course, if you watch any other previous videos or classes you may have missed. We are still closed. Temple's closed for any in-person services or activities. It doesn't seem to be getting any better, unfortunately. So far, we will probably remain closed until the end of the summer, at least, or maybe beyond that even. So we'll see. But hopefully, we can all get back together soon, because I definitely miss our Sangha, miss all the interaction we get to have. I think we learn so much better when we're in a group. That way we can ask questions, get to know from everyone's experience. So let's go ahead and get into it. So distractions, right? So distractions is something we're gonna face during any meditation session. Even advanced meditators will still get a distraction or two. And that's ultimately our goal, is just get a distraction or two, or no distractions at all. If we are new to meditation, or we've just kind of started maybe a month or a year ago, we may have a lot of distractions, in the dozens even, right? Our whole session may be just one giant distraction. And that's okay. As I've mentioned before, and I've always said that being distracted is okay. Entertaining your distraction is what's not okay. So when we are meditating, right? So we've adjusted our posture. We're in our position. We are in the meditation, right? So before you meditate, we always want to make sure you have an object in meditation. So you have to create that object first, right? So whether it's counting the breath, whether it's feeling the sensations in the body or in the breath, or how it moves, or if you're saying a mantra or whatever it may be, you have to have that object in meditation. You have to have that focus, and you have to reiterate to yourself, this is my object in meditation. That way you know, and your mind knows what to go back to when we are distracted. So the most common, of course, is just counting our breath, as we've discussed last week or last class. If you're counting the breath, and you're counting for every in and out breath as 1, in and out 2, in and out 3, up until 10, and then once you're 10, you would repeat. What I recommend doing is once you're at 10, you pretty much want to go backwards, counting from 10 to 1. For any time during the counting or during the meditation you get distracted or you lose count, you want to go back to 1. Even if you're counting backwards, you want to always revert counting back to 1, starting from the very beginning. So there are different types of distractions. I think one of the most common type of distraction, at least for me, in my practice, is you're counting the breath, but you're still distracted, but you're still also somewhat attentive to your object meditation. So I can be counting, but also thinking about food or thinking about chores or something, right? So my mind is multitasking, and that's one of the most common types of distractions. But what also happens during that is if you are counting the breath and you're entertaining your distraction, what may happen is you're counting beyond the 10, right? I've gotten to a point where I've counted up to like the 90s, and I'm like, obviously I'm distracted. Let's go back to 1. So it is common to be multitasking in some way, right? But there's no multitasking in meditation. Meditation is one object, one focus, one concentration. You cannot and should not multitask during meditation. So if you find yourself multitasking, then essentially we'll practice one of the methods we're about to go over about how to work with distractions, and simply just go back to our object of meditation and count back to one, or whatever other object you're doing. You want to essentially just go back to the very beginning. So multitasking is one type of distraction. Another type of distraction is entertaining the thought. So you can be counting, you can be observing the sensations in your body, whatever it may be, and all of a sudden you're thinking of your chore list or your to-do list, right? Or maybe thinking about dinner or lunch, and then all of a sudden you're thinking about the ingredients that you're needing, and you're thinking, do you have all the ingredients? And then you're thinking about making a grocery list, so you can go to the grocery store, get your groceries, come back, etc., right? You're thinking about the storyline, and that's the hardest distraction to uh, one, to identify, and then two, to kind of get over. It's hard to identify because that type of distraction where we're entertaining the thought and we're making the storyline, or we're making this to-do list or whatever it may be, because that's something that we habitually naturally already do. It's hard to see and identify during meditation that it's a type of distraction, right? Because it's something we naturally do, right? If we're in the kitchen, if we're doing our chores or whatever, we're naturally making to-do lists. We're naturally thinking of what we have to do later or tomorrow or in the morning or whatever it may be, right? These are natural, habitual thoughts that come in or that come through our mind. And so because of that, it's a little bit more difficult to identify during meditation. But again, if you do find yourself being distracted, it is completely okay. I've always said it's okay to be distracted. It's okay to know that you're distracted, because if you can identify that distraction, that is a huge accomplishment for you, and that's a huge accomplishment to you practice. Because it's not necessarily about not thinking, right? That is our end game. That is our end point, the very end, right? Years down the line. It is our end point to reach a state of no thinking at all. But until then, if you do distracted, it's okay. Your task right now is to identify, to realize that you're being distracted, and to go back to your object of meditation. So don't be discouraged if you do find yourself distracted. Don't be discouraged if you're distracted every second, or you're having to remind yourself to go back to your object of meditation every few minutes. That is completely okay, and that is a huge accomplishment for you. So don't ever feel distracted, or don't ever feel discouraged that you are not doing something right, or you're doing meditation wrong, or meditation's not for you, right? Because that's one of the things I hear quite often from people, is when they first try to meditate, because they're getting so distracted all the time, and they know they're being distracted all the time, they think that meditation is not working for them, and they give up on meditation. But at the same time, they're not really realizing that identifying that distraction is an accomplishment. And because people may not know that, or think that, or believe that they eventually leave meditation. They give up, they quit it, right? So don't feel like that at all. Know that being distracted and thinking during meditation is normal. It's okay. Your goal now is to just identify that. Your goal is not necessarily to have an empty mind. Your goal is to concentrate on your object of meditation and identify any distractions that may arise. So now that we've identified a distraction, what do we do about it? So there are different ways where we can tackle this distraction. The most common and probably the easiest and most traditional way is to label distractions. Labeling, simply giving a one-word label to whatever is coming up in your mind, right? So if you're thinking about your shopping list, or if you're thinking about dinner or lunch, you're just going to label it food, or chore, or hunger if you're hungry. Whatever it may be, right? Just try to find the core identity of what the thought is about, and then just give it a quick label, and then go back to your object of meditation. And the same thing for feelings, for sounds, for noises, even for tastes, right? So if you hear something outside, if you hear a car honk its horn, I don't know why I got a brain fart. If you hear a car, or if you hear a dog barking, or any sound you may hear, you just want to identify that sound and just give it a quick label. So you can say car, or dog, or airplane, or yelling, or kids, whatever it may be, right? And the same thing with feelings. So if you're feeling discomfort, right, you can say discomfort. You can say hunger, or tired, or whatever it may be. If you smell something, just try to identify what the smell is. It may be food, it may be the air freshener, it may be the candle, incense, whatever it may be, right? Just find what the one thing is about it, and then just give it that quick label. A second method is a fairly silly method, but I've read it in a few different places, and I've tried it myself a couple times. And it's basically talking to your distraction like a child. And it sounds funny, but our mind is essentially like a child, right? The more you tell it no, the more you tell it don't bother me, don't distract me, don't come up with thinking, the more you try to force it to do what you want it to do, the harder it's going to try to actually make it happen, right? So the more you tell it no, don't distract me, the more it's going to push those distractions towards you, right? It's going to make it more obvious for you. So one way is to essentially be like, listen, thinking, or whatever thought you want to call it, literally say, I'm trying to meditate. This is a moment of meditation, moments of silence, of concentration. And please allow me to meditate, or whatever it may be, right? Basically, you're talking to yourself in a way, in a not crazy way. That way, it's taking the power out of the distraction, because ultimately our mind has power over us in some way, shape, or form. So you're pretty much just taking that power away from the thoughts. You're telling it, you are not controlling me. I am trying to control you, right? That's essentially what we're trying to do, is to control our mind, to reprogram our mind into being less distracted, to being more mindful, to being able to concentrate better and longer. So you want to speak to it like a child, and then basically just try to discipline it. It sounds silly, and I can't recall where I read it before, but I read somewhere that you can even get to a point where you can give your distractions a name, like a silly name, like just some random gibberish name, right, to take more power away from it. I haven't done that before, but it's showing you, the point of it is that there's no one right, correct way to mend these distractions, right? So you can label it, you can just pretty much, or you can give it the silly names and talk to it, or you can simply just tell yourself to snap out of it, right? To snap out of the distraction and go back to your object of meditation, which is usually what advanced meditators would do, right? So if you've been meditating for quite some time, and you're fairly used to the meditation practice and knowing how to work with meditation objects and distractions, the snapping out is the advanced form of that, because you're not labeling it. You're not telling it to go away or to stop bothering you. You're essentially just snapping yourself, kind of in a mental flash or something, right? Just tell yourself that, hey, this is a distraction. Let's go back to our object meditation. So you're not really saying anything mentally. You're not talking to the distraction. You're not labeling the distraction. You're just identifying that distraction is there. And then it's pretty much just snapping back to your object of meditation, back to your breathing, or back to whatever other object you're meditating on. So f- those are the main ways. The labeling, the talking to it, and the snapping out of it is probably the most common ways we can work with our distractions. So I would recommend to experiment with some of those. If you have some other ways you think would work better for you, definitely try to practice those. Essentially, you're just the whole point of these classes, these meditation classes, and in the past I've mentioned, I'm giving you different techniques. I'm giving you different ways to meditate on, different things to meditate on, because there's not really one correct way to meditate. There's different ways to meditate. But the reason I'm giving you different methods and techniques is so that you are able to find what works for you best and work with it. Because you'll get to a point, hopefully, in your meditation practice where you no longer need a technique or method to meditate on. You can simply just go into your meditation and kind of just get into that zone. And that'll be also kind of a point down the line where you want to get to. But until then, it is definitely easier for our practice to utilize and to use different methods, different techniques, different ways to identify distractions and wandering thoughts, right? And so I say again, don't worry too much. Don't be discouraged if we are being distracted. It is common. It's normal. Don't feel like you're doing anything wrong, because we're not. It's very good that we are identifying and knowing that we're being distracted. And it could take the entirety of your session that all you're doing is just telling yourself to go back to your object meditation, right? But our minds are malleable. They are reprogrammable. So what we're doing as we're identifying these distractions is reprogramming our mind, letting it know, training it, saying, while you're in a session of meditation, you don't want to be distracted so much, right? You're focusing on your object of meditation. Your object meditation is your concentration point. That is what I'm needing to focus on for this duration. So it may take you many sessions. It may take weeks or months even, just to get to a point where you can have a solid 5 minutes even of just fully concentrated on your object in meditation. So it does take time, right? Just the same way it takes us time to train for a new job or new occupation or career, it's going to be the same thing for our meditation. It's going to take time. So don't think that we can just meditate for a session or two and all of a sudden you're a master meditator, because that is definitely not going to happen. I don't even call myself a master meditator either, because even I get a lot of distractions, right? But the point is, of course, as I mentioned, is not what to think, right? As for right now, but that you're able to identify those thoughts, those wandering thoughts, and those distractions. So it's going to take time. So if you find yourself just telling yourself to stop thinking and stop being distracted for the whole session of your meditation, that's fine. You've done your goal of what you need to do for that session. Is just identifying those distractions. And so if you have to do that for many sessions, for many weeks, for many months, maybe even a year, that is completely okay, because it will get easier. You're training your mind. Remember, I've always disciplined my students and told them that meditation is a discipline. It is not a hobby. You can't just pick it up whenever you feel like it, and do a quick meditation. You can't just come and go in and out of it whenever you want. It is a discipline. So you have to make time for it. You have to be diligent in your practice. You have to be disciplined in your practice. I highly recommend setting some time out of the day, every day, for meditation. Whether you're meditating for 10, 15, 20 minutes, it doesn't matter. You have set some time, anytime during the day, where it's constant every single day. And that's going to help you tremendously, because it's going to retrain your mind. It's going to reprogram your mind, saying, hey, the time for meditation is coming up, or now is the time for meditation. And it'll help you gradually get into the habit of doing it. And once you get into the habit of doing it, it will become easier to focus on meditation, because your mind knows. You're training your mind, you're reprogramming your mind, saying, hey, now it's time to meditate. This is the object of meditation. This is the time for meditation. This is my place of meditation. And it will become much easier if you do it that way. So set some time out of the day, whether it's in the morning, afternoon, at night. Just be sure that you are awake enough to do it, that you are in a place where you will be where you will have the least amount of distractions from exterior sounds or objects or whatever, and that you're doing it comfortably. Another thing is if you are meditating on the floor, right? So if you're sitting, if you're sitting cross-legged or half lotus, which I recommend, or full lotus, if you're doing it more than 15-20 minutes, then your legs and your feet are probably going to fall asleep. So in the beginning, if you're fairly new to it, in the beginning I do recommend to adjust yourself, right? Try to adjust yourself slowly and mindfully. So whenever we are meditating, if you do have to adjust yourself, so if you have to adjust your back, your shoulders, your feet, your legs, whatever it may be, do with mindfulness. Make a mental note that you're moving whatever part of your body you're moving, and just saying moving or lifting, shifting, adjusting, whatever you want to do. The same way that you're labeling your distractions, you want to label your movement that you're doing. That way you're mentally prepared and being mindful of that movement. So for the first couple months, you can, of course, make those slight adjustments, being mindful of it. But after some time, I recommend if your feet are falling asleep, at least for that part, if your feet are falling asleep, your legs are falling asleep, after a while, because in the beginning when you're adjusting it so much, your body knows it's being adjusted and it's going to get better. But it's never going to go away for the most part, or at least not anytime soon. So after a while, once your legs and feet start getting tingly and falling asleep, I recommend to pretty much just hash it out. Just let it be, right? Just let your legs fall asleep, and work through the pain. Because again, you're training your body as well that this position is what you're trying to do, right? It's very difficult for Westerners to be sitting on floors, right? They're not as common to be sitting on the floor, unlike in the East, everybody sits on the floor most of the time. So since we've grown up sitting on chairs for the most part, it's difficult for a lot of us to be sitting on the floor, especially for an extended period of time. So just like working out, right? For exercising, it's something you have to train for. You are training your body to adjust to the exercise, right? So it's the same thing we do when we are trying to adjust our feet and legs that are falling asleep. So after a while, just fight through the pain. It won't last forever, the pain. It may get to a point where it's very discomforting. And if it gets to a point